Today, we are breaking down Walter Football's brand new 2026 NFL mock draft. Let's jump right into this. If you guys are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going to be doing tons of draft content throughout the entire year, and we're probably going to try to expand in some other areas as well. So get excited for that. If you guys do want some extra content and love the players that are listed below my face, well, the players that you can see are on all the videos that are already up on the show, player rankings, and those are the positions that I have done. I'm keeping some of the defensive ends and the edges secret because I'm right now working on a video for a top 20 on the show, a top 30 something on the Patreon. So feel free to go support that because there is a top 31 running back video over on the Patreon videos as well. So feel free to check that out. Extra content. You also get the board as well as all of my evaluations, $5 a month. A couple of you guys have already signed up, which is amazing. Thank you guys again. But let's jump into this. The number one pick. We have the Saints here selecting Arch Manning. It's debatable whether he would come out. I think all the chips would have to align for this to work. Obviously, he'd have to win the Heisman, have to win the Natty, and then at that point, if he thought the Saints organization, which, I mean, I can almost guarantee you he won't, if he believes that they're the situation that's right for him, then you very well could end up seeing him in this situation. However, I think the odds of that is like 1%, and that's really heavily predicated on the fact that the Saints are not necessarily looked at as the best organization in the league right now. So, I mean, also, Arch said he wanted to play 4 years. There's another factor in there as well. But if he does come out, I think the Saints would be dumb to pass on him. However, if he says, I'm not playing for y'all and tries to pull an Eli, I would end up saying trading this pick would be a really profitable move. At number 2, we have the Tennessee Titans going Keldrick Falk, defensive end out of Auburn. He was 6'6", 288. He's now listed at 270, so that number is out of date. I ripped Walter Football a new one because they had a horrible mock draft that literally had Elijah Badger, who's a UDFA, in it, and it's like, come on. I don't know if that was Charlie, but I know there's just a lot of stuff floating around on X. You can go figure out whether you support Walter Football or not. I personally do not. Has nothing to do with anything political. I would just say the guy just seems like a genuine douchebag, but I think there are 2 creators on the site, so hopefully Charlie is the better of the 2, but, he's not 6'6", 288. He's 6'6", 270 as of the moment. I do think that Keldrick Falk's biggest issue last year, which I guess I'm spoiling the Edge video that'll be coming up next week, but maybe even this week. Might get exciting, but it's really endurance. Like, he has a lot of the physical traits that you're looking for, but the endurance was really lacking. So slimming down to 270, I think, will be a massive step forward unless that 288 number was a bit inflated. So TBD on that, but Keldrick Falk is one of the top 5 edge rushers in the class. If you have him as your number 1, I don't think there's a noticeable enough gap for me to disagree with you. It's a very, very close gap. At number 3, you have the Cleveland Browns going CC Maui-Goa, tackle out of Miami. Francis is a very good tackle. I'm not going to blame anybody for loving Francis. I know that Mr. Schmo, who's also a Miami fan, so got to give him shit wherever we can. But I do think that, after watching some edge rushers go against Francis Maui-Goa, there's a lot of reasoning as to why you might really like him. The arm length is a potential concern, but I do think that with the experience, with the mobility, and just with the general understanding of how to play with mobile quarterbacks as well as he has with Cam Ward, I think that there's going to be a lot to love with his game. At number 4, we also have the Cleveland Browns selecting a Domani Jackson, cornerback out of Alabama. Domani's a solid corner. I mean, to me, you guys can end up seeing my exact opinion on him, but I have him rated around that day 2 range at the moment. But someone who has the potential to be a true day 1 corner, was awesome at USC and ended up struggling early at Alabama, but even in that same year, really did bounce back. That's the biggest thing for me, bouncing back and being able to develop in mid-season. That's why I fell in love with Joey Porter Jr. It's like just seeing players mid-game, mid-season really improve upon their mistakes. That's what I can bet on over every single offseason. It's how you're going to perform. And I really do want to bet on Domani Jackson. At number 4, feels a little bit rich, but I understand the overall idea. At number 5, we have the Carolina Panthers going Caleb Downs, defensive back out of The Ohio State University. Actually, hold up. Cleveland didn't even draft a quarterback. I don't know how the hell I missed that. By the way, yeah, substitute Domani Jackson as a quarterback, and then I'm going to be, I'll be accepting of whatever the hell's going on. But continuing, number 5, you have the Panthers going Caleb Downs, defensive back out of The Ohio State University. I mean, arguably the best player in the class. I do actually need to update my wide receiver grades to reflect current grades because I actually ended up knocking him down a little bit. And I think it's a lot more balanced, especially position for position. But, Caleb will be my number 2 player in the class, very slightly over Jordan Tyson. But, I mean, who gives a shit? Both of them are blue chip players to me. I think the Carolina Panthers getting a blue chip player is never a bad idea. And you could just never have too many amazing players on your team. It's a good pick. At number 6, we had the New York Giants going Jermod McCoy, cornerback out of Tennessee. Jermod just needs to watch out for his athleticism overall and then getting hurt. The problem is he tore his ACL in January. Now he has Colton Hood to be able to take some of the stress off of him, which is very good. But I don't think either of those guys are necessarily the most athletic players on the field. Jermod is an amazing press corner. I don't really see him fitting with what the Giants are trying to build there. And if they're at number 6, the whole entire organization is scrapped and their first pick's not going to be a corner. But, he's a fun one nonetheless. At number 7, the Chicago Bears go TJ Parker, edge rusher out of Clemson. I'm just going to be honest. TJ Parker is extremely underdeveloped. He's a weird build. He's at that 265 frame, which you think is perfect, but he doesn't play necessarily like 265 pounds. I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility for TJ to be worth this pick, but every year we have some defensive interiors, some edge rushers that we put on a pedestal that should not be here. I'm not saying TJ Parker is in that mix. There's another one that I can almost guarantee will be on this. It's a live reaction that I would end up putting in that category. But TJ Parker to me right now is that fringe day 2 territory. Just a lot to develop on. And, there's parts of games where he disappears, which a number 7 pick, in my opinion, should not be doing. But regardless, super young, super talented, just needs to work on the polish to be worthy of a top 10 selection. At number 8, you got the Las Vegas Raiders going Jordan Tyson, wide receiver at Arizona State. He is ridiculously talented. However, my favorite wide receiver from last year's class, Jack Besh, is on the team. I think that he's going to take the mantle and not require Jordan Tyson to be kind of like an option that they really look at here. But I'm not going to blame him if Jack Besh, for some reason, doesn't work out. Jordan Tyson would be on a short list of guys I'd want on the team. At number 9, we have the Cowboys going Jeremiah Love, running back out of Notre Dame. He is one of the best backs in the country, arguably the best back in the entire country. He is so athletic. He is smooth. He's explosive. He can hit home runs. I think the vision will continue to improve. That's usually what happens when guys get more and more experience. The offensive line is getting more experience as well. I think that that Jeremiah Love, as well as Jadarian Price, who I love to death, are going to be a dynamic duo that's nearly unstoppable. If Notre Dame's quarterback situation is adequate at best, then I still think they have an extremely large margin over a lot of other schools for the national championship. There's just too many damn good players on that team. At number 10, we got the Miami Dolphins going Caden Proctor, tackle out of Alabama. Is that how you spell Caden? I'm tripping. It might be. I might be tripping balls. But Caden's a freak, 6'7", 360 range. I think he might be down to the 350s. But regardless, he's an athletic phenom, and he moves like he's 320 pounds, which is excellent. He has very long arms. Like, this is definitely a high potential pick. The problem is the floor is absolute cheeks. I mean, he just makes some of the worst mistakes that I see from tackles. He looks like a player who's relied on being a mountain that's athletic for his entire life, still working on the polish, which is scary when you go to the NFL and there's these master technicians that deal with guys as talented as Caden Proctor on the daily. But I would say there's definitely a chance that teams will end up buying in on Caden Proctor and taking him in the top 10. It's very realistic. So I could see this happening for the Dolphins, where the right tackle situation for the long run is Jonah Savania, and then maybe the left tackle situation for the long haul is Caden Proctor. At number 11, we have the New England Patriots going Mateo Uiagalelei, edge rusher out of Oregon. I'm going to be honest, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. This is not the player I was thinking about, but this is also applying to him. I think Mateo is extremely overrated, and I think he's going to get a lot better. I'm just saying the current product that we saw last year, I think people are taking too much projection into this, and Mateo's fun. He's just so underwhelming when you look at the top end talents of the class. And I watched them side by side. There was no fatigue. I was like full adrenaline pumping, super excited. And Mateo did not live up to the hype for me. But edge rusher absolutely is a position I think the Patriots should be targeting. And it just depends on whether Swinson ends up working out, because then that would end up being probably your edge 1 or 2. And then I guess you could fill out the other one at number 11. At number 12, we have the New York Jets going LaNorris Sellers, quarterback out of South Carolina. I know that there's going to be very few people who see LaNorris Sellers the way I do. I am not a quarterback guru. I am just someone who's completely honest and continues to learn from my mistakes and successes. And so eventually we're going to continue hitting bullseyes as we continue to learn what to see and what to not see. But I do think that, the fact that I've been able to watch so many quarterbacks and understand like what makes them tick versus what doesn't, it's weird for me in retrospect when doing some self-analysis to love LaNorris Sellers. Hello. To love LaNorris Sellers is just such a weird thing for me. I'm never really into these styles of quarterbacks, the ones that are primarily athletes, but I mean, he's just different. And it's really like his high end is Lamar and Cam combined. The low end is, I mean, you can talk about like a high end Taysom Hill, and that's still very valuable. That could still end up working, whether it's a quarterback or not, for 10 years in this league. So I think the Jets would be absolutely loving getting LaNorris Sellers here, and then especially being able to basically be the upgraded version of Justin Fields. I would say that this would be an A+. At number 13, we have the Indianapolis Colts going Peter Woods. I'm excited to study the defensive interior class. I'm praying to God that Peter Woods is as good as what we think he should be. There's certain players that just end up really letting you down, certain players that end up living to the hype, and some players that catch you off guard. And I'm praying to God that Peter Woods is that one in the middle, because we all kind of know it's very similar to Mason Graham, that this guy could, like, they're coming into the year red hot, and it's very tough to maintain that momentum. But I do think Peter Woods could end up doing that based on his flexibility, his build, and his overall production. And I mean, for the Colts, defensive interior is far from out of the question. So I don't think that's a bad move at all for the long haul. At 14, you got the Rams going Jalen Gilbo, cornerback out of Texas. And if I'm going to be honest, I studied, I think, over 40 corners. Jalen was not one of them that ended up popping up. So I'm intrigued to see how this ends up turning around. I ended up studying the other cornerback, Malik Muhammad, for Texas. So TBD on this. I know that they're really big fans of him. So I mean, again, this is from a site that ended up using Elijah Badger as one of their picks. So I'm not really taking it too heavily, but, maybe somebody who we can circle back around and check out. At 15, you got the Vikings going Keon Saab, defensive back out of Alabama. I like to prefer to go after cornerback talent just because I think it's a lot easier to steal safety talent than it is to steal corner talent. That's just a thing for me. But regardless, Keon Saab has that potential from when he was over at Michigan to now where he's at in Alabama. I think that he could really end up polishing up. I think everyone had hiccups there at Alabama. So we could really see Keon Saab in that year 2 phase going off for the Crimson Tide. At number 16, we have the Seattle Seahawks going Anthony Hill Jr., linebacker out of Texas. Pretty much consensus linebacker 1. Haven't dug into the linebackers myself, but watched Texas's defense ad nauseum, and, him, Colin Simmons, both those guys are standing out so much for how young they are. I do get terrified of the fact that I am believing that, it really puts into perspective, which is why I say you can't watch multiple players at the same time. You really have to watch one player the whole time. I was thinking that I was going to put TJ Parker in blue chip tier, just going into the edge room. And then, obviously he's multiple tiers below that for me. Same thing with Anthony Hill. I hope it's not the same, but I do have that same concern where it's just like, I'm seeing other corner of my eye do really well. How's it going to be when I fully focus on you? So TBD on that. Let's go to the second half of round 1. And I'm not a huge fan of this. We are absolutely not disabling our ad blocker. I'm making money off this for my ads. Hate to say it, not allowing you to make that money on yours. But regardless, I'm not going to necessarily dip into round 2 because that's where things started to get a little bit wonky. But Denver Broncos go Denzel Boston, wide receiver out of Washington at number 17. I'm not necessarily the biggest Denzel Boston guy. I think he can definitely be someone to take over for Cortland Sutton. But, I mean, it's just really, really early. I think Denzel Boston is my wide receiver 20, but he serves a really solid role. And something I do want to mention is that even though we end up all having these rankings 1 to 15, 1 to 20, and it's going to be wildly different, if you end up filtering it down based on the role that these receivers are playing, there's no reason why you're debating between Denzel Boston and Antonio Williams. I mean, they're just different body builds. There's different roles for what they're going to do. So the only reason you would debate the two is if you have both of those positions open, which in that case, you're doing a shitty job in free agency. But regardless, I do think that, with Denzel Boston, in terms of being a vertical X, he's one of the best in the game. And if you end up thinking that's a first round talent, by all means, I still think of that as a day 2 to day 3 talent. But, Denzel Boston's still a fun player. At number 18, we have the Washington Commanders going Ruben Bain Jr. Ruben Bain, spoiler alert, very well might be my edge 1 of the class. This dude's absolutely fantastic. You even look at 2023 film, he's even better. But I really wanted to hone in on how he plays post-injury. And even when he was hampered, he still balled out. And I do still see a little bit of the lag there in terms of the lack of endurance. But, I mean, overall, I still see him as a phenomenal athlete, and I think he's going to be amazing. For the Commanders, that would be an absolute dream. At 19, the Arizona Cardinals go Xavier Chaplin, tackle out of Auburn, formerly of Virginia Tech. I mean, he is a really solid, consistent tackle. For me, he was going into last year as that day 3 range, the day 2 range, and he had a phenomenal year, really saw that production step up. We'll see when I dive into the tackles whether that's justified to put him into this range. But, I mean, the numbers are incredible. And, whether it's the statistics, whether it's the measurables, on paper, Xavier Chaplin's awesome. Number 20, we have the Los Angeles Rams going Harold Perkins, edge rusher / linebacker at LSU. The Rams just don't value linebacker very much, and that's what makes me a little bit more worried about it. However, Harold Perkins is still a super fun player. If he can end up healing and being the player he should be, I mean, there's not many players who could end up playing as consistently elite as Harold Perkins does when rushing the passer. So, I mean, he might be 220, but the dude apparently is trying to get up there to the 230 mark, which there is a role for that in the NFL. First round role, I'm not sure. But at number 21, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers going Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback out of LSU. This would actually work in an Arthur Smith system. The problem is, I mean, this is why I continue highlighting, not a single soul except for myself. And again, feel free to give shout outs to people who have given this criticism as well. But I mean, I'm trying to see if it's in here. No one's talking about the fact that this guy is thin. I mean, 200 pounds. I don't care if you don't look thin. I mean, physics are physics. Like, if you're a 200-pound quarterback, that's a huge red flag for the NFL. Kyler Murray, Bryce Young, they're heavier than 200 pounds at 4 inches shorter damn near. Because we all know the midgetry is in existence in the NFL. But Garrett Nussmeier, I just don't know why people aren't criticizing that on top of the turnover issues and such. I know he didn't have a possession receiver, but I don't think that's an excuse for poor decision-making. I think Garrett Nussmeier is still a very fun quarterback. Don't get me wrong. And I do think he'd work well in the Steelers. I think especially with DK Metcalf, he could end up having a ball. But I just would say, maybe hold in the horses a little bit on that. And, at 21, I wouldn't be pissed off, even though I'm a little bit lower on Nuss than most. I also see him continuing to grow and develop into the passer that he should be, which would make it a lot more palatable. At number 22, we have the Green Bay Packers going Mansour Delane, cornerback out of LSU. He's my number 1 corner in the class, tied with Avion Terrell, so who gives a shit? They're both amazing. But either one of them would be fantastic for Green Bay. I would not debate this whatsoever. It would be an absolute home run pick. At 23, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going Suntarine Perkins, linebacker out of Ole Miss. I'm just going to be completely honest. I do not think he's NFL caliber. And I got so excited to watch him. Statistically, this guy's a nightmare for offensive linemen. Like, he just lights it up. But I just do not think he's good. I really wanted to like him a lot more, and I just couldn't. He is 210 pounds to a T. Like, he is 210. So that's just a big bother for me. But if you're going for a pure linebacker play, maybe Suntarine would be better. I ended up he's the only edge rusher that I've graded out of 26 so far that I have given a linebacker role or dream fit rather than, wide 9 or, being just a pure defensive end. But just not a fan. Not a fan personally. At number 24, we have the Texans going Drew Shelton, tackle / guard out of Penn State. A lot of people have been showing a lot of love to Drew Shelton. I'm not necessarily there in terms of looking at the tackles, but I've watched a lot of guys get past Drew Shelton. So I'm not necessarily super confident in his ability, but again, it's a little bit different when you get to watch players as to why they fail, why they succeed. So TBD on the tackles. And then we have the Cincinnati Bengals going Jalen Kilgore. I just do not see slot corner / slot safety as the big need for him in the first round. Just continue to develop the offensive line, continue to develop the boundary corner situation. That's just where I would end up focusing a lot of my strengths. I did not think, and it's Jalen, it's not Javon. I don't know why they can't, why can you guys not Am I tripping? I swear. I think I ended up doing this last time too. It's pretty sure it's Jalen Kilgore, but I don't understand. I personally don't understand. You know what? We are literally going to be looking at this on the fly. Jalen Kilgore. Yep, there he is. There he is. Yep, it's a typo. It's a typo. So again, come on, guys. I know I make mistakes. It happens, and honestly, for the fact that the other one was absolutely chopped compared to this, I'll give some credit, but you know, it is what it is. Oh, we're going to talk about that in a second. You got the Niners going Austin Barber, tackle out of Florida at 26. A lot of love for this guy because his flexibility is there. I mean, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, in my opinion, should not have been on the field. Just not a good player. I think it absolutely let Austin Barber kind of be in the dust in terms of the production, because I think the offensive line would have showed a lot more strength with Austin Barber, a competent right tackle, as well as Jake Slaughter. So that's just where my head's at. I mean, I'm tripping. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure that. Why am I tripping balls? Regardless, the opposite tackle. I know Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon's the opposite tackle. I'm trying to remember whether Austin was the left or the right, but I know Austin has played both. See, there you go. I get my little slip up as well. But regardless, I do know that my guy Guillermo is going to love getting offensive tackle for the Niners. I think it's absolutely paramount, and they've been ignoring it way too long. Here is the guy who I was talking about earlier. At number 27, the Los Angeles Chargers take Tyreek Sapp, an edge rusher out of Florida. I was so excited to watch Tyreek. And the thing is, you look at the production, it's like versus LSU, a ton of production, right? And I watched that LSU game. It was the most embarrassing and fruitless production I have seen, because it was the worst guard play that Tyreek Sapp just continued to take advantage of, which is good. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. But when it came to proper tackles blocking him, whether it would be Emory Jones, whether it would be obviously Will Campbell, but even when you're talking about the other offensive linemen, he didn't do well. And then you watch his game, if I'm not mistaken, versus Texas, because Isaiah Bond, if I'm not mistaken, ended up getting an end around where I ended up posting this on X. Just some of the most embarrassing reps I've ever seen. Athletically, he's absolutely there. I do question whether he has the endurance to make it through a whole game, but it's just, this guy is more of a physical freak that just doesn't understand the game of football. And I really hope I'm wrong about this one. I hope it comes back to bite me in the ass, because I was unbelievably excited. I see a Sapp last name. I see a Florida Gator, and I love the Florida Gator mentality on defense. Sapp just did not do it for me at all. At number 28, we have the Buffalo Bills going Deion Burks, wide receiver to Oklahoma. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be dynamic, but I just don't see the Bills, after paying Khalil Shakir, wanting or having the targets for a player who's about 5'8", 5'9". I don't really see Deion Burks being much of an asset on this squad. At number 29, we have the Detroit Lions going Ernest Green, tackle out of Georgia. I am not a fan of Ernest Green. He ended up being kind of put into a rotation last year. It just looks like a lot of people still want to hold on to hope. Never really had it for me. I think he's more of a guard. Don't think he's a great athlete, but we'll end up seeing what happens here. But it was kind of embarrassing last year, to say the least. Number 30, we have the Kansas City Chiefs going Antonio Williams, wide receiver to Clemson. Dynamic weapon. Very scary when you pair him up with Raw as well as Xavier Worthy. I mean, you're just talking about a perfectly balanced receiver core at that point. I'd be terrified. I mean, Antonio Williams is such a reliable receiver that it's just going to be very hard to get a better receiver core that is super young than what the Chiefs would have. At number 31, we have the Baltimore Ravens going Amari Farrell, cornerback out of Indiana. I have not seen Amari. Again, I've studied 40 cornerbacks, and he was not one of them. But 6'2", 200 pounds, Indiana knows what they're doing. That gets me excited. So I'm going to trust what these guys are going to do. So TBD on that. But the Ravens getting a physical boundary corner, never a bad idea. At number 32, and ending this off, actually there is no round two. That makes me feel a lot better. At number 32, we have the Philadelphia Eagles going Blake Miller, right tackle out of Clemson. Blake Miller, actually, in terms of the athletic profile and just the high floor play, could actually be a pretty solid future option for like what you're going to do for Lane Johnson. However, with the developmental tackles that you brought in, whether that is Hinton, whether that is Cam Williams, whether that is Holland Pierce, I think that that's going to be a better strategy than spending a first on Blake Miller, because Blake Miller is just more of a low ceiling type of talent. And I'd prefer to spend this on a Kenyon Sadiq, tight end out of Oregon, who's just super dynamic. Or, I mean, hell, I'm looking at some receivers here because that's pretty much all I have. But if you want to go for another physical boundary corner, Davison Igbinosun, who is super smart in zone coverage as well. I mean, that's another player that I'd be very intrigued with to have on that boundary as a corner too. That's where my head would be at overall. But let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, showing the support you always do. I know I've been posting a little bit less than regular, so I do apologize about that. I'm trying to get through all these edge rushers and all these players so that when we do crank up the content, I'm at an understanding that I've never been at, and I really want to give that to y'all. And especially for those of y'all on Patreon, I want to be able to give back to you as well. So again, feel free to go subscribe over there. Thank you again for watching. Love you. See you on the far side. Peace.